Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the Foreign Language Teaching Series. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and I'm coming to you from Martin in the state of Tennessee in the United States of America. And this is a new series of podcasts or video casts in this case, where we're going to be talking to different people about the teaching and learning of foreign languages, be it Spanish or English, French, any foreign language that you might be interested in and that I may be interested in, we're going to be talking about. And we have some interesting episodes for you. I'm hoping in the near future. And today we're going to have a special conversation, special connection via Zoom with the city of Vigo in the northwest of Spain, where I was born. And a good friend of mine who has taught English at different levels and who for many years now has worked as a teacher and also teaching coordinator at Vaughan Systems in the city of Vigo, Spain. She's a good friend of mine from my years as an undergraduate English major at the University of Vigo. And besides our love of teaching, she and I share other interests such as the cinema, literature, and of course, soccer as well. And her name is Susi Bugallo. Susi, welcome to the Foreign Language Teaching Series, and thank you for being a part of this.
Thank you, Anton. Thanks for having me, and my pleasure to be here and share this time with you.
Well, I know that foreign languages are an important part of your life and your profession as well. And, you know, foreign languages really were one of the reasons why we met all those years ago at the University of Vigo. And so I'm wondering, just to start to kick off this conversation, when and why were you first drawn to foreign languages? Was this a skill that came naturally, easily to you? Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, I first started learning English at a very young age, which at that time, like in the 80s, as you probably know, it wasn't that common. Nowadays, you have every single parent in Spain interested in their kids learning a foreign language, especially English. But at that time, it was just my parents' idea, and they just knew somebody who had started a language school, and I started taking classes there. So ever since, I've always liked English, and later on other foreign languages. And my very first contact with English, I think it was when I was 5, 6 maybe years old, and so it was quite a long time ago. But it probably wasn't until I first studied abroad through one of these Erasmus programs when I actually started speaking it properly, or just trying to communicate in English.
So when you and I met in college back in Vigo, we were both English majors at that point. We were studying what is known as English philology or filología inglesa in Spain. When you began your studies as an English major in English philology in Spain, did you already know that you wanted to teach, or did you think that maybe there would be other applications for this skill that you were learning?
Not at all. I had never thought that I would end up teaching, and I had always liked foreign languages, but I had always thought that I was always more drawn towards a translation, or even like a linguistics, or like nothing actually related to teaching. And it wasn't until I took my first teaching job, which I did because, as you know, when you're a student, you just need to make some money, and teaching high school and middle school students, it's an easy way of of making some money. And it was then when I realized this might be something I would like actually doing for a living.
Hmm. Yeah, it's interesting because for me, I've always known that I wanted to teach. I think it was partly because my father was a teacher for over 40 years, and so I think that I had quite a bit to do with it. But here in the United States, sometimes I feel like students don't realize that besides teaching, there are other things that one can do if one learns Spanish or French or German. Do you think that a foreign language is a skill that opens many doors in a country such as Spain, in the south of Europe, or is it something that's maybe not as valued as it could be?
And no, it definitely opens up a lot of doors, and not only when it comes to teaching, but everywhere. In my case, I had I was trying when I started studying at university, was trying to find out like what. Which ways I could take that where English could help me develop a career, and so I was looking into translation, or maybe working in proofreading, or things like those. But for everybody else, just knowing how to speak a foreign language, especially English, if you work in international trade, if you work like everywhere, if any multinational company you work for, you will probably need to speak English, and possibly many other languages too, but especially English.
Have you noticed it in the last, I don't know, 10, 15, 20 years? Have you noticed a change in the value or how people value foreign languages? In other words, do you think that it is more valued in Spain now than it was, say, when we were kids or when we were students?
Absolutely. I remember when I first started working at Vaughan Systems, I was mainly teaching people who were working for different enterprises, for different companies, and where their bosses, their managers were forcing them to learn English, or in some of the cases they just needed to take a test to get a certificate. And but I always got the impression that many of them weren't really interested in communicating in that language. It was just something they needed to get and to go through, and in order to to obtain something else. But in the last few years, I've realized that's changed, or at least that's the impression I'm getting from my students. Not only because you can tell that they are really interested in communicating, that they actually tell you that they have to use English on a daily basis at work, but also because they keep telling me about other languages they're learning, and you can tell during the class because those of them learning Portuguese, French, German, and they keep using words in the wrong language during the class, which is very funny. And but yeah, I think that's actually changed a lot in the last few years, and I'm glad it did.
Now, when I introduced you, I mentioned that you work for a company called Vaughan Systems. Sometimes Spaniards would pronounce that last name in a different way because it's not an easy name to pronounce in Spanish when you see it written. So some people refer to it as Baugan or Bauhan or something like that. But it's called Vaughan Systems. What is Vaughan Systems, and what do you do there?
Well, basically, we teach English. That's what we do, and we teach English at very different levels. We do classes in company for employees from different industries, and we teach adult students who need to pass a job interview, who just need to who just want to take regular classes to improve their spoken level of English. We teach kids, and but basically we focus on that's what I actually like about the place where I work, is that we focus on communication, on the most practical side of the language. Something that, as you might know, in the Spanish educational system, we've been failing for years, because I've never really liked the way English and many other languages are taught in informal informal education, and at schools, and so that's something I really enjoy about working here, because we focus on communication, on getting students to develop their oral skills, and to become a bit more fluent in the language, and that's basically what we do.
Well, I'm interested in that communicative approach that you're talking about. I think it is important because sometimes, when I'm teaching Spanish here at the university in the United States, I feel like the students don't realize that communicative dimension of a foreign language. They just think it's, something that they take because, it is required and, a class like any other just to get a grade. But I always try to impress upon them the fact that you can actually use the foreign language in a real life context outside of the classroom. What are the motivations that you would say your students or those students that attend Vaughan Systems actually have for learning the English language?
Well, in the case of kids, which is a great part of what we do, teaching younger students, they're it's their parents' motivation usually what brings them there, but they actually enjoy attending classes, and it's actually something really rewarding, teaching them, because kids learn so fast, and um, they just taking everything you teach them, and but for adult students, I think their motivations, in some cases, is it's just a need they have because of their work, and they work for a multinational company, and they just need to communicate to other colleagues in English, and but in other cases, it's just people who speak other languages, and they like to learn how to communicate in English too. People who already have a good level and they can communicate, but they'd like um, to correct some mistakes they keep making, and they like to become a bit more fluent. So you can find like different profiles there, and while at the very beginning when I first started, it was basically one same kind of student, the standard student who would take classes with us, was there was always like a, 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 a specific kind, and lately you can actually find the age range is very different now. You find from very young students, like young adults, to people who have recently retired. So it's a broad range of students here.
Now, you mentioned before, Susi, that it was very important to you to study abroad. And I always tell my students of Spanish here at the university that the best way to learn a language, besides taking a few classes, is to actually take a trip study abroad trip if possible and study in the country where that language is spoken. Now, you spent some time in England as an Erasmus student all those years ago, and I wonder how important to you personally was study abroad in the development of your English language skills.
I would say very important. One of the most important parts of my learning process there, because as you said, and I couldn't agree more with you. I recommend every student to always take a trip if they have the opportunity to spend some time abroad and um, at a in the country they choose where they can actually practice the language. In my case, I spent one school year in London, and when I first arrived in there, I realized, because I thought when I first started studying at university, that my English was good enough, that I could speak perfectly, and I had no problems whatsoever to communicate to anyone uh, until I arrived in London, and I first came across one of those local people in there with that Cockney accent, and I had to ask them to repeat what they were asking me like 3 or 4 times, and then I got embarrassed, and I just said, "Yeah, that's okay," and I wasn't even sure about what they were asking. So it's really important because as we always say, one thing is what you teach in the classroom, and the way you probably know as a teacher, the way you speak to your students during the class, it's probably not the way you would speak to your friends out of the classroom, and the kind of language your students use during the class. Uh, it's not real in the case of yours, your real Spanish, or in the case of my real English. So it's not until, in the case of my students, until they step into a meeting with a bunch of other native speakers, that they actually come back to me and get back to me and tell me, "Oh, look, you know what we've been practicing. I'm so proud of myself because I was actually able to make my point, get across what I wanted to say." And same thing happened to me when while I was studying over there. That I realized that I still had so much to learn, and for me it changed completely the way I approached the language, and also the opinion I had about my own English level, which, by the way, my recommendation for anyone who wants to spend some time in England learning English is don't go to London. It's full of Spaniards and people from other countries, and in my case, I don't know if I was lucky or just I don't know, smart enough to surround myself by native speakers, and the fact that I was playing for the university women's football team helped a lot, because you learn a lot from being surrounded by a bunch of other British football players. So,
Like-minded people. Yeah, I think in many ways what you say resonates with me, because I always tell my students, that one of the problems is if they want to practice Spanish and they go to Madrid, or they go to Barcelona, or they go to Toledo, someplace like that, you're going to find a lot of tourists there. And of course, I think for an American, it's very difficult to actually get away from speaking English, in the sense that everyone will just mill around the American students that we send to Spain and want to speak English with them. And then they don't get a chance to actually practice Spanish, which is what they're there for in the first place. So sometimes maybe a smaller town, or a place that's not as big and as cosmopolitan as, say, Madrid or Barcelona would be helpful. So I'm glad you didn't have that sort of experience in London, but I would guess the same thing is true in London, where people from all over the world basically live and meet there.
Yeah, definitely. Actually, I think that after talking to many other colleagues who were studying abroad, even in those cases where they were in a smaller city in England, or they at the very beginning they had a similar experience. People who were studying in Oxford, in Cambridge, in Bath, or Durham, or things like places like those. At the very beginning, there are many other students from many other countries. You're you're living at a students' hall or students' residence, and for the first couple weeks, couple months, you surround yourself by those students, and you feel more comfortable. You're all in the
Mhm.
same situation, and it was the same for me for the first maybe 2 or 3 weeks, basically until I joined the football team, and that changed my whole experience. And it was such a difference that I decided that was the right way to do it, and uh, and that it's great to be surrounded by Italian people, French people, German people, and that was great. And I would see them every day. When I got back home to the residence. But
Mhm.
I think if you want to make the most of your experience, when it comes to learning a language, you should really try to surround yourself by as many native speakers as you can.
So I guess in your case, soccer was helpful in more ways than one. So that's a good
Definitely.
thing. Now, something else that you said resonated with me, because when I was, I don't know, 13 or 14, and I was in high school, and we actually had an exchange with a school in the north east of England, well, West Yorkshire, and I used to think back then that my English was pretty good, but then I got to West Yorkshire and I experienced sort of what you said, that I could communicate with people and they could communicate with me, but when they were speaking amongst themselves, and just friends and the people in the family with whom I was staying, I could not understand a word. Or sometimes I could understand words but not like a complete sentence, because the accent is so different, and then the register is different when you're speaking, to your friends or to your family, or when you're in a more formal situation. So that's one thing. I learned how to play cricket when I was up there, uh, but I also learned that I still had a lot to learn when it comes to English. So I sort of had that same experience, and of course, being in the U.S. for going on over 20 years now,
Whoa.
obviously, that's when your ability to speak a language really develops, when you really settle down in a place like England or Australia or the United States, or for my students, in Mexico or in Spain or something like that. Now, as a student of English yourself, Susie, obviously English is a second or third language for you, in the sense that you and I both speak Spanish and Galician, Gallego, and so English is more like a third language. But what aspects of English you as a student find especially difficult? Because I feel like different languages have different levels and degrees and areas of difficulty. And they're not always the same for every language, depending on what your native language is. When you learn a second or a third language, there are certain areas that may be more difficult. So, in your experience, in your personal experience, what do you think those more difficult areas are when it comes to English?
That's actually very interesting because those same things I find more difficult, or that I used to struggle more with when I was a student myself. It, I think those help me understand what my because I work mainly with Spanish students, and people whose mother tongue, whose native language is Spanish. So it's one of my main tools to try to identify what they struggle with. Well, like I can anticipate the kind of problems or common mistakes they're going to make in English, and things like well, when it comes to pronunciation, the S, those words starting by S plus a consonant, like
like a
how many
liquid
times?
S, right?
That's it. And how many times have you heard a Spanish person saying, "I live in Spain," right?
Spain
And
instead of Spain, yeah.
exactly. And it's like, no, I'm from Spain. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I can tell. And then there are many other, well, pronunciation problems. So many, not only that one, but pronouncing the th as in this or that. Those things. People usually find it very difficult. And then I don't know, like common mistakes, like most of my students keep saying, the people in Spain is very nice, and so they tend to use singular for words like people, because of the so mainly the problem in and I think that comes from the very bad job that has been done in Spain when it comes to teaching English, because people keep translating like directly from Spanish, and that's where these kind of mistakes come from. Or like when my students say, "Yes, I am agree with you." That's a direct translation from Spanish, and instead of saying "I agree,"
Estoy de acuerdo. Yeah.
Estoy de acuerdo. So they translate it, and I'm agree. And so those are two of the mistakes I keep correcting, like every now and again.
If it makes you feel better, it happens the other way around as well. I think my students here in the United States have the same problems, sometimes with pronunciation, but also the example of people, which is plural in English but singular in Spanish. They always, or some of them, actually use the plural for gente, for people.
Exactly.
So I guess it goes both ways. But you yourself, as a learner or as a student of English yourself, what did you find most difficult as you were approaching the learning of English, and how does your experience help you in the classroom?
And I remember I found particularly difficult some the pronunciation of some sounds, like the some of those words starting by W. Let's say, would you like to? So pronunciation was probably the what I struggled the most with, especially with like a specific words rather than like as a general problem. And I think that being aware of that struggle that I used to have when it came to pronunciation, especially whenever I learned new words that I had never heard before. And when you first come across a new word that you see in a book or just written somewhere, and usually English it's kind of difficult sometimes.
You just never know.
You just never know. Exactly. You try to follow a pattern, and try to find similarities with some other words and try to pronounce it in that way. But so that's why I think that being aware of that has helped me incorporate that in my classes, and trying to give my students as many tools or little hints or tricks on how to pronounce certain words, or just trying to make their lives easier, just trying to find words that follow the same pattern. And okay, remember, these kind of words are always pronounced in a similar way. So I think that's uh, that struggle that I had as a
Hmm.
student has helped me become a better teacher than I used
Now,
to.
you mentioned before that it was important to your style of teaching and also the kind of work you do at Vaughan Systems to be communicative. And that reminds me of, a professor we used to have at the University of Vigo, you and I, and you probably know who I'm talking about, used to say that language is a technology for communication. And I tend to agree with that because I think that communication is one of the primary reasons why you would want to learn a language. I mean, you could want to learn a language just to read a book, but more often than not, it's because you want to communicate with other people and interact, right? So I wonder what strategies or what is it that can be done to make a class or a classroom more communicative? Because I always tell my students here when I'm teaching Spanish that really the classroom environment is I always say it's not real life. Real life, as we were saying before, is different, and the way you communicate in real life is different from the way that you communicate in the classroom. So what do you do, or what can be done in order to make a foreign language classroom more interactive and more communicative, so to speak?
Well, in my case, I'm very lucky when it comes to the number of students that I have in my classes, because I teach very small groups. I'm talking about like 6 students per class, 8 maybe, and I've only had a bigger class when I was teaching other teachers, when I was doing a teacher training, that
Mhm.
I had classes of 20, 25, 30, 30 students, teachers. And because I have such small groups, it have making the class more communicative. It's much easier.
Mhm.
Thinking about a formal, because the work that I do at home, or that we do, it's not formal. It's not formal education. I don't teach at a school, at a formal school, or a high school, and so that gives you a bit more freedom, and there are no like formal tests, and we don't depend on a final result that students have to obtain, and that allows the teacher to implement during the class activities that involve everyone, that allow you to interact with every student, and or to involve every single student in one single activity. Something that I guess that in a bigger class with 15, 20, 25 students, it's just not possible, because if you have if a class lasts 50, 55 minutes, an hour, there's just no way. There's no time to involve everyone.
Mhm.
So I think that that's one of the reasons why I can focus more on communication, and on more dynamic
Mhm.
activities.
Yeah, I sort of face that problem in my Spanish classes here at the university sometimes because the cap, the highest number of students in a classroom could be 26. So that's a lot of students, and so you have to come up with, group work and those kinds of interactions to get them to speak in Spanish to each other and then kind of share it with the class. I mean, what I'm saying is that when you have, as you say, a higher number of students, it becomes more difficult. It can be done, but it may not be as effective as when you have uh, a smaller number of students. And I wonder, Susie, how important is your own experience, like your own life? How does your own life reflect in the classroom? How do you use your own experiences in the classroom, if at all?
It's funny because during the class we work a lot on helping students. Remember, I was mentioning that many of them tend to translate directly from Spanish, and that's part of the problem
Hmm.
when they try to speak fluently. So we try to work on helping them thinking in English rather than in Spanish, and then translating the sentence into English. So we do a lot of like question answer drills, or like telling somebody to ask somebody else, so that they work both on direct and indirect questions. And so it's they usually like it when the teacher puts in there like a personal experiences, and so I try to incorporate whenever we have to practice as part of the lesson, asking questions. So I have to one of the activities we practice in some classes is telling students to ask you questions. So basically, I because you know that it's something that when teaching Spanish it wouldn't work, because you don't both in affirmative and interrogative use the same construction. It doesn't change.
And that's why we have an opening question mark, is something the students always ask me. Why is there an opening question mark in Spanish? Because we need to know where the question starts.
Exactly. And something that doesn't happen in English, and that makes my students go crazy. And so it's like I tell them to ask me questions so that they can practice both, or I tell them to tell somebody else to ask me a question, so they practice both indirect and direct style, and they love it when you throw in like personal information about yourself, about your experiences, about what you've done when you were younger. And it's true that for example, I work mainly with Spanish students, although I've had some students from Italy, Portugal, and some other places, but mainly like 90% of my students are from Spain. And it's true that at the very beginning, the fact that that I'm Spanish myself, and unlike the most of my colleagues, I'm not from a foreign country. I can't bring in the class like some exotic story about or like some cultural difference, but I've found that the fact that they can identify and relate to your own experience as an English student, as a student of English when in the past when I was younger. It's something they actually appreciate during the class, and I've learned that it's something that I can actually use, and it's something they can benefit from. It's like when they see that you made it there, you can speak English, you can communicate, and that makes them think, oh well, I can make it too, and if she can make it, why can't I? It's so I think that my personal experience as a student, rather than being something that would make students not connect with you as a teacher. If anything, the opposite. It's something that I found that it's helped both me and them. I think.
I completely agree. And I feel like it's always important to find some common ground in that sense, between you and the students. In my case, is the fact that although I was born in Spain, I've been living in the US for, a couple of decades now. And so, they can ask me questions about my experience in Spain, but they also share the same experience with me of living here in Tennessee. And so, there is the common ground. In your case, the common ground would be, well, I was also a student of English. And so I have gone through this before you did. And I understand that kind of, situation, that kind of endeavor of trying to learn a second language and trying to master a second language. How important is the cultural aspect, would you say, in teaching a foreign language? Because I often feel like a foreign language also opens a door towards a different culture that you could become, or you can actually get in contact with by means of the language, and perhaps it would be harder to know a specific culture, be it British, uh, Irish, American, Spanish, Galician, whatever it is, if you don't have at least a notion of the language.
Definitely, because in my case, ever since I spent time in England, that's made me want to learn more about other cultures, and also the fact that I'm every day surrounded by foreign people at work. It's actually fantastic because I've never thought that working in Vigo, which is my hometown, I was born there. I would have never thought that English would be like my main tool, like for communication. If you had told me that like 15 years ago, I would have said you were crazy. And so my on a daily basis, I get to communicate in English with people from all around Europe, and among them, British people. Some of my best friends now are from England, and for the last few years, I've got to spend time in England every now and then, and which has made me get to know better the culture there. Have friends in Ireland too, um, and we have teachers from Eastern Europe, from Germany, from Poland, from many places. We have I have there's a fellow teacher from Australia, another one from South Africa. So it's I think it's really important, and if
Mhm.
I stop to think about it, uh, I would have never been able to get to really know these people and to actually call some of them very good friends
Mhm.
if I hadn't learned English. And that's what I always tell my students when I see a student that is not motivated to learn the language because maybe because they're young and it was their parents who told them they should take classes, or because it's their company paying for their classes. It's like, look, uh, uh, um, okay, you might not like the language, but just think uh, about what the language can do for you. Like there's so many things you might be missing
Mhm.
for not being able to communicate in a different language. And I'm talking about English, uh, but I love learning languages, and lately I'm starting to learn a couple more languages myself. So I've started with a little bit of Italian, and I'm trying to start learning Russian, and I'll tell you how that goes because it's still in process, and but I'm loving it. So it's something I always encourage my students to do, because the benefits from that are just so many that it's worth it.
Yeah, for me, the interest in languages has always gone hand in hand with my interest in the culture. If I was interested in English, it was because I was interested in British and American music or literature or cinema, or wanting to learn more, not just about the languages, but also about the countries where those languages are spoken. And I think, for example, the students of Japanese that we have here at the university, because we have a minor in Japanese, I think they are very motivated. And the reason for that is that they're already interested in Japanese culture, be it comic books or cinema or music or whatever it is. And for that reason, they want to learn the language as well. I feel like the same thing happened to me with English, with French, with Portuguese. It's just something that I have always been interested in, but not just because I wanted to learn the language, but also because I wanted to get a chance to meet people from those places, to get to know the people and the customs there, and obviously, like you said before, you never know what's going to happen, because in my case, I thought I was going to be a professor of English somewhere in Europe, and I ended up becoming a professor of Spanish in America. So you definitely never know. Now, one thing
Never.
that I do want to ask you about is I feel when I go back to Spain to visit, I feel like there are not as many people in Spain who speak a foreign language or English in particular as there are in other parts of Europe, like Scandinavia, for example, Sweden or Norway or Denmark. I feel like in those countries, English is almost like the second language for the people living there. And there's a huge amount of the population that is at least communicative in English, whereas in Spain, I don't get the feeling that that is as much the case. I mean, I don't know if you agree with this, if you see something different, if this has changed in the last 20 years that I have not lived in Spain. But if it is this way, how could we explain this? Does it have to do with something that is cultural? Does it have to do with something that is linguistic? Social. I mean, what could you say about that? Because it's a topic that has always interested me. Bearing in mind that when I travel through Portugal, I feel like the situation is somewhat different than it is in Spain.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention Portugal because you don't have to get too far to find an example of a country where most people can communicate very well in English, while in Spain, you're right. It's difficult to find people who
I mean,
actually
I'm
do.
speaking in general, but
But I must say that it's slowly changing.
Mhm.
It's I can. Uh, I wish it changed a bit more quickly, but I can tell that I can see that it's slowly changing, and in the last couple of years, we're getting many more students who already start from a more advanced level, and while when I remember 10 years, 15 years ago, uh, almost every single student started from almost from scratch or from a very elementary level. So, but why does this happen? Many people think that that one of the reasons why in Spain we struggle when it comes to learn a foreign language, and especially English. It's because of the cinema industry, and the fact that every single foreign movie has been dubbed into Spanish, and so I don't know if that's the main reason why, because it's true that there are other countries where that happens too, and that also happens, and
Like Germany,
and
yeah.
like Germany, exactly, and their English level is way better than the one we have in Spain. But I think that for some time, people in Spain haven't been that interested in learning a foreign language. We've always been a country where tourism has been one of the main industries here. So, which it's funny because I think that one of the reasons why people have never been interested in learning English is because people weren't interested in traveling or moving abroad. But at the same time, we every year we were receiving tourists from all over the world, and and you would think that learning English would be like actually a good idea for especially for those places, those places that are a bit more touristic, and so yeah, I think the situation when it comes to foreign languages could be much better, but I also think it's slowly changing, and I think that the most important thing would be to change the way we teach foreign languages in Spain. I think that's key here, because I think we haven't been doing a very good job at schools with foreign languages, and that shows. And so that all starts from the very beginning, from the youngest students, and the minute we change that, and I think that it's slowly changing, but too slowly. Too
Yeah,
slowly.
and I think that's very similar to what happens here in the United States, where I feel like a foreign language, whether it be Spanish or any other, um, isn't always as valued as maybe it should be, because of course the Hispanic population in the United States has grown exponentially in the last 20, 30 years, and so it is much more common now than 20 years ago here in Tennessee. If we think about other parts of the country, it's even more so, to find people who speak Spanish, even people whose only language is Spanish because they're more recent immigrants. So, the importance of Spanish in particular has grown quite a bit here in the United States. And yet, students don't start, at least in the schools in the area around here where I live in West Tennessee, they don't start learning a second language until high school.
Wow.
Until el instituto, right? So that's really late. I do think that when we were in elementary school, it was in sixth grade or so that we started learning English. And I have heard also that in Spain now, there is this big push to make some of the public schools bilingual in the sense of Spanish and English. What is your opinion of that idea? Do you think that's going to help improve the level of English in Spain, or do you think it's more of a political thing that sounds good as a marketing strategy, but that maybe will not be as helpful in the long run?
So in the long run, I don't think it'll be that helpful. It sounds good when you first hear about this idea. Let's make schools bilingual, and I do think it's actually a good idea if you implement this from the very beginning, from 3-year-olds when they first attend school, which they do. But the thing is that it's also a bit of a marketing campaign, and I remember when this bilingual program was first introduced in some primary primary schools or secondary schools, the teachers were not actually ready for that, and English teachers were barely ready to teach English in English, because as you might know, I remember when I was I don't know, I started learning English at school, I think when I was 11, maybe.
Yeah, just
And
about 11 or 12. Yeah.
yeah, and I remember many of my teachers taught English in Spanish, like the whole lesson was taught in Spanish. And the thing is that when this bilingual program was introduced in schools, the idea was teaching not only English in English, which makes total sense, but teaching science or maths or arts,
History,
or some other. Exactly. And the thing is that they forced teachers to get a Cambridge certificate stating that they had a certain English level, or but they made teachers' job more difficult. They made students' learning experience also more difficult, because they weren't ready to receive classes in English, and so they had not only one struggle but two. They had to pass the science test in English, and so I think that rather than helping is actually I read a study a few weeks ago saying that that many more students were failing subjects like science, like history, like arts and things like those that now are being taught in English. And so the percentage of students failing was much higher than it used to be. And so the idea sounds good, but it sounds to me like trying to build to start from the roof
from the
rather
roof,
than
from the top down
exactly.
instead of
And
from the bottom up. Yeah, I think
exactly. So
I feel like the way you're describing it, it sounds more like they are actually placing a hurdle in front of the students, and the students, that the language, instead of being something that helps, is something that is hindering them from learning other things. I have always thought that it is important to value foreign language teaching from the very beginning as a subject, in the sense that, if it is well taught from the beginning, then it is internalized in a way that it is not if you wait until you're in high school, or if you force it in this way. Um, but I suppose that it is a process that depends on a whole bunch of different people, and it just depends also on what part of the country you're in, what kind of school you're in. It is something that I feel like if it is mandated uh, by the government in that way, it is a lot easier to talk about than it is to actually implement.
I think so. And in Spain, education depends on regional governments, even though there's like a national
Mhm.
agreement on basic stuff. But then there are certain areas that don't really depend on the central government, but on the regional governments of every single region, which makes some curriculums very different from one region to another.
Yeah,
And
this happens in the United States as well, in different states, even in different counties sometimes.
that's it. So that's why. And then talking about bilingual programs in places like in Galicia or in the Basque Country or in Catalonia, you have you have one more problem on top of this English Spanish bilingual thing, because you have this other language
Mhm.
that is also official in that area, and that and that makes politicians confront each other. Some of them are for it, others against it, and
Mhm.
so in the end, something that could be could add to the learning experience, and to learning one more. I was going to say foreign language, but it's not foreign to the people who live in that
Another language.
region. Another language, and it ends up also being another hurdle, as you were saying earlier. I like the analogy of just setting some obstacle in front of students, and
Mhm.
rather than just helping them out.
Well, and as we're winding down the conversation, Susie, which I'm really enjoying, and I appreciate your time, and you're agreeing to this chat with me today, as part of the foreign language teaching series on my YouTube channel. I'd like to go back to the classroom, because you mentioned that when you started learning English, there were some teachers that were teaching English and Spanish, and maybe their pronunciation was not so good, and that made me think of something, which is. As a teacher of a foreign language, in your case English, in my case Spanish, how important is um, the native language of the students? In other words, how much Spanish should you use in an English class when you're teaching? I think there's this pull towards teaching English in English, or teaching Spanish in Spanish, and using 100%, if possible, of the second language in the second language classroom. What do you think about that? Do you think that is a good idea, or do you think that the native language should be used as a crutch sometimes?
And in my case, well, whether I use it or not in the classroom, which I tend not to, I try to teach as much as possible in English and only in English. But the fact that I can speak Spanish myself helps me understand, first of all, what students are saying, because sometimes you can't really help students. You can't really prevent them from speaking Spanish to each other. So it helps you understand what they might be saying to each other sometimes. Or when you teach beginners, and because you're trying to teach the entire class in English, and they might not understand everything. So they end up asking you questions in Spanish. So that's it. That's a great tool for a teacher who's either Spanish like me, or who can, as many of my fellow teachers can are native English speakers, but can speak in Spanish. And about your question about how much Spanish I use in the class, I try not to use it at all, but if I must, if it's something that it's going to help me make the class a bit more dynamic, I'll use it. For example, when it comes to vocabulary, sometimes you spend so long trying to explain what a word means in English. And which slows down the pace of the class, and sometimes the students looking at you like, I'm not sure whether I'm understanding where you're trying to get at. and sometimes it's much more, it's much easier. It's just okay, this is what it means, right? And so and especially if it's not part of an activity, if the activity we're doing is okay, vocabulary, I'll give you a definition, and you have to try to come up with, because we're working also on listening comprehension, then that's fine. But if it's just a question that came up during the class, and it's just something it's going to help, it's like, okay, here's the word in Spanish. Also, I try to use it for translation, for examples, like for students to identify what this sentence, this construction, this expression, how this translates into English. Like this whole thing equals this other thing in English.
I think it's interesting what you're saying in that sense, because I think in Spanish, I feel like when I'm teaching Spanish, difficult areas of grammar, like the subjunctive, for example, or the difference between para y por, or the difference between preterite and imperfect, el pretérito perfecto simple y el pretérito imperfecto. Those are things that are very difficult to actually teach only in Spanish if you want the 50-minute class period to actually go well and be effective. But there's always a fine line between using too much or using too little, because it is very important for me to make the students understand that when you're learning a language, you're not learning to translate from a language to another language, because that could be easily and very badly done with mechanical translators online these days, and it doesn't really help. But I think the students in Spanish realize this. What you're saying is very important. This expression means this, instead of translates word by word as this. When they learn in Spanish to say their name, for example, me llamo John, no? And very often a mistake that I hear is me llamo es John, because what they're doing is like rewording and translating word by word the Spanish word. So me means my, llamo means name, which it doesn't, obviously, as you know. So the verb is missing somewhere, they think. So I have to throw in a verb, es, right? Whereas if they learn that me llamo and then the name is what you say when you want to say your name, then you don't have to think about what it means, because you already internalized that that's the usage of it.
Totally. And actually, I always find it difficult to teach my students the present perfect, and because of the way you use it in Spanish. Like in Spanish, you would say le conozco desde hace 12 años, but in English you'd say, oh, I've known him for a long time, for 12 years, and so sometimes I have to tell my students, look, I know in Spanish you would use the present simple to say this, le conozco, but just so you know, in English we would say it in a different way,
Mhm.
and this is something that becomes especially difficult when teaching Galician students,
Mhm.
and because as you know, we don't use the present perfect
There's no
in
present perfect
there's no
English.
present perfect at all. So for them, it's all passive. For them, for us,
Mhm.
I was leaving myself out of the of the equation. And so we never use in Galician the present perfect. We use the past simple. So for my students, it's quite difficult to understand like when they have to use it. So it really helps giving them this hint, giving them the equivalence in Spanish, right,
Mhm.
or in Galician, and say, look, whenever you use this, whenever you say this in Spanish, this is what it equals in English, and I think in that way, as you were saying, it's actually something
Mhm.
that can help the teacher convey the message or get something across to students.
And with things like the subjunctive, when you know that it's something that doesn't really exist, or at least it got lost somewhere along the way in the history of English, then it's just something that needs to be learned, because this is how it's done, and if you translate it, you're going to get it wrong. You just need to know what the situation is that requires this. And I always find it very difficult and sometimes frustrating as a professor, the fact that there are students who are able to do exercises about the subjunctive, but then when they have to use it themselves in a real life context, then they're not able to do it because it's not an exercise anymore. And then that leap from the classroom to actually internalize it in such a way that you will use it yourself. I think it's something that can only, or it's a lot easier to do once you travel and you have to use it and you hear it, and then you internalize it better. So I suppose what you're talking about kind of makes me think of an example like that. um, and my final thing that I wanted to touch upon before letting you go and closing the episode of the foreign language teaching series here with Susi Bugallo, where we've been talking for over an hour now, in a direct as part of this direct connection via Zoom between Martin, Tennessee, and Vigo, Spain. I'd like to finish talking a little bit about something that I noticed in the United States, which is that all of these classes that are classified as STEM classes, like science and technology and those kinds of classes. Um, I think in America, in the United States, there has been a greater emphasis on those classes from, elementary school. I can see that with my own daughter, who, right now is in third grade here in Jackson, Tennessee. Then also through high school, and as we get to college, this becomes very obvious that these STEM classes are emphasized a lot more. At least in the last 10, 15, 20 years, I have seen a growth in this kind of emphasis on STEM subjects. Why do you think that is? Does that happen in Spain as well? Or is this just something that I can see here in the United States, but that maybe does not translate to Europe as clearly? And in this context, what do you think the humanities have to um, offer to the mix? What do the humanities bring to the table, so to speak, in a situation or in a context where STEM, science, technology, etc., are emphasized so much?
I think humanities bringing, especially helping people have an opinion, express an opinion, and helping you actually have a critical thinking, and something that I find many of our students, especially the youngest ones who are brilliant at science, at maths, at those other subjects you were mentioning, but they lack sometimes the ability to communicate, to make a presentation, to deliver a presentation, and it's actually something that that many of our students request, like one-to-one classes, besides the usual group classes they take with us, just to prepare an oral presentation they might have to make in front of an audience, whether it is for work, or in some of the cases it's for school, or I remember a case of a high school student who was applying to get a scholarship, a really important one, to study in the US, and she had to prepare a presentation on a subject, and so many of those students need extra help on. And it's and to be honest, they mainly need help on how to deliver that presentation, how to get the message across, not on the English side of things,
more like the communicative, or like the rhetorical plane.
Exactly, because their grammar is good, their vocabulary is good, they know what they have to say, and they just don't know how to structure the message. They don't know how to connect the ideas, and the same thing you can. For example, our classes don't focus too much on writing and on written communication, but we do have some specific courses, like courses to prepare for English exams, or to obtain a certificate. So in those courses, we that's where we focus on writing a bit more. And you can tell that not all of them, but many of them lack the ability to express their ideas. They have the information, but they don't know how to express it in writing. And I think that's what humanities can what they bring in, because I think sometimes education and the educational system focuses too much on those other subjects, which are important, and I don't regret learning maths at all, but I think that sometimes we don't give humanities and arts enough credit, because I think people just rely, just think about them as well, they're not as practical, and so from the most practical point of view, it's like they're not as useful as science, technology, or any of those other subjects will be for their futures. And but without humanities, you wouldn't have teachers. Without teachers, nobody would teach maths or science or history or technology or any other thing. So I think that sometimes they're they don't get the credit they deserve.
Definitely, I absolutely see the point, and I share that opinion as well. I think when people present the internet as something that's going to solve all our problems, it's definitely, there's a lot of information out there that and things that we can do, like you and I talking right now. We wouldn't be able to do this 15, 20 years ago, not as easily, at least. But one thing that you do on the internet all the time is reading and writing and expressing yourself, whether it be by speaking or by writing texts, and the processing of all that information. That's where I think the humanities comes in, and is very valuable in that sense. Um, Susi, my final question is, and I promise to let you go after this. What has the learning of a foreign language brought to you as an individual, both personally and professionally? What has been, do you think, the biggest benefit or some of the biggest benefits that you have had personally from learning a foreign language, other than the two languages that are already your native tongues?
And well, as personal benefits, getting to know other people, other cultures, being able to something as simple as traveling without getting scared of getting lost in a city and not knowing how to ask somebody for directions. And it's I've studied Portuguese. I started at university too, and I was also lucky enough that as you know, I live very close to the border with Portugal, and some time ago my dad had an advertising company in Portugal. So it was based in Portugal and in Monção. Like, so very very close to Spain, and I worked there with him for a few months, which was a great experience for me. It was one of my first jobs when I graduated, and so I wouldn't have been able to do that job and have that experience if it weren't for that fact that I had, well, both that I'm a native Galician speaker, which helps understanding Portuguese people, but also the fact that I also studied Portuguese, and you learn about the differences with Galician, and you learn how to pronounce it, and the grammar, and so it provided me with that other working experience. So so personally, probably some of the most important personal experiences I've had in my life come from learning or knowing foreign languages, and professionally, it's given me the opportunity of developing a career and making a living out of this, and of course of learning from other people I've been able to meet and to get to know, due to the fact that I can communicate in another language. So so probably one of the best decisions in my life, and also I think that my parents were like completely right, and were really clever when they decided that it was a good idea to sign me up for English lessons when I was very very little. So so I should thank them too.
Well, a huge benefit for sure. Susi, I truly appreciate your time and your being here on the Foreign Language Teaching Series video cast. Been wanting to do this for a while, and finally we were able to do it today, as the semester, at least here in the United States, comes to an end in the fall of 2021. It's been a pleasure chatting with you. I'm in touch with you very often, but I've been wanting to record this conversation for a while. So thank you very much, Susi, for being here and for your time and all these insights that you have shared with us on the Foreign Language Teaching Series. Hope to see you in person fairly soon if COVID will allow.
I hope so, and well, my pleasure. It's been great being here for this little while, talking to you, and I'm looking forward to you finally seeing you in person, hopefully very soon. Let's see if as you said, if COVID allows, and fingers crossed that that will be soon.
Well, I hope so. I haven't been back to Europe since 2018, so
My goodness.
that's quite a long time, and it's not
That
because I didn't want to, but things happen. In any case, thanks again. This has been a new episode of the Foreign Language Teaching Series. My name is Anton Garcia Fernandez, and our um, guest on this occasion, on the second episode of the series, has been Susi Bugallo, a very good friend of mine who lives in Vigo, Spain, my hometown in the northwest of Spain, in South Western Europe. And she has worked for many years as a teacher of English and also as a teaching coordinator at Vaughan Systems in the city of Vigo. Thanks everyone out there for listening. This has been recorded live thanks to Zoom, this Zoom connection that we had between Martin, Tennessee and Vigo, Spain in the month of December of 2021. Mine and also Susi's, of course, is the copyright of this broadcast on my YouTube channel, Anton GF. If you have any comments or anything that you'd like to say, just leave it underneath the video and we'll be very happy to read it and answer if need be. Until we meet again here on the channel, Anton GF, hope everybody's having a great time. Hope you're safe wherever you are and hope to see you again before too long. So long, everybody.